pretty upset about it. And we saw in the first set of verses that they are so upset that they're actually insulting Yamraj, saying that we thought you were the Supreme Master, but apparently you're not. And are you even qualified to be served as the master? Kind of implied there. And then uh, uh, while the Yamadutas are kind of denigrating Yamraj, we will see in the next section Yamraj respond to it. So until verse 10, we will see the angst or the anger or the disappointment of the Yamadutas. So verse 7, Atastvameka bhutanam sheshwaranam adhishvara shasta dandadharonanam subhasho vivechanaha. The supreme judge must be one, not many. It is our understanding that you are that supreme judge and that you have jurisdiction even over the demigods. Our impression was that you are the master of all living entities, the supreme authority who discriminates between pious and impious activities of all living beings. So the Yamdutas are presenting their understanding of the position of Yamraj. So, as a principle, they are saying that there cannot be many judges, because if there is disagreement between the judges, then the results will be different depending on which judge dominates. And the nature of law, and in this case the law of karma, is that the result should always be the same, which can only happen if there is only one person qualified who is judging. So the Yamadutas had gone to claim the soul of Ajamel, but their judgment was overruled by the Vishnudutas. So they are asking now, who is the judge over here? Are you the judge, or are those Vishnudutas the judge? We thought that you were the judge, but does not look like it. So we see them insulting Yamraj also. Verse 8, Tasya te vihito dando na loke vartate duna chaturbhiradbhute sede agyate vipralambita. But now we can see that the punishment ordained under your authority is no longer effective, since your order has been transgressed by 4 wonderful and perfect persons. So Adbhuta Siddha, they're describing the Vishnu Dutas. Adbhut is they had never seen such a personality because they were coming from the spiritual world. And Siddha, because they had perfectly presented the logic and defeated the Yamadutas. But they're continuing to make this point that we thought that you are the authority under which we operate, but does not look like that is true. Verse 9, Niyamanam tavadesha asmabhiryatna granan vayamocyan patikanam chitva pashan prasayate. We were bringing the most sinful Ajamel towards the hellish planets, following your order, when these beautiful persons from Siddhalok forcibly cut the knots of the ropes in which we were arresting him. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments in this case that the Yamadutas are trying to incite anger in Yamraj towards the Vishnu Dutas. So repeatedly, they are being glorified as wonderful, effulgent, perfect, beautiful. And repeatedly, the Yamadutas are saying that they surpassed your order. So now they are not making it so much as between them and the Vishnu Dutas, but they are making it between Yamraj and the Vishnu Dutas. So Chakravarti Pad is saying is that the Yamadutas want to bring the Vishnu Dutas before Yamraj. If Yamraj could then have punished the Vishnu Dutas, the Yamdutas would have been satisfied. Verse 10. Tamsti veditam ichhamo yadi no manyase kshamam narayante abhite ma bhairityayurdrutam. As soon as the sinful Ajamil uttered the name Narayan, these four beautiful men immediately arrived and reassured him, saying, "Do not fear, do not fear. We wish to know about them from your Lordship. If you think we are able to understand them, kindly describe who they are." So, behind all this anger and desire for revenge in the Yamadutas, there is also genuine curiosity. They want to know more about the Vishnu Dutas who have transgressed the order of Yamraj. Where do they live? Whose servant are they? Where do they draw their power from? So here we see that uh, uh, the Yamadutas, in reciting the incident, they say Narayane Abhihite. So even they are reciting the name Narayan. And we see that Yamaraj will be very, very jubilant by the fact that his servants are reciting the name Narayan and that the name of Narayan has been recited in his court. Because Yamaraj, he deals with the sinful people. Devotees never go there. So there is no occasion for any Krishna Katha. But through some confluence of events, the opportunity to do Krishna Katha is arising. So Yamaraj is, as a devotee, is very happy that Narayane Abhite, that Narayan is going to be discussed. The Yamadutas we see, they also maintain the mode of servitude. They say that if we can understand, please explain. So Yamraj, he might ask them that, what exactly are you so upset about? The Vishwanath Chakravarti says that the Yamadutas, so this is an interpolated conversation. So the Yamadutas are saying that we will die of shame, not able to tolerate defeat. That they approached the most sinful Ajamel and said, "Do not fear." They cut our ropes and simply freed him. They defeated us by their logic and forced us to come back empty-handed. So this is what is causing the Yamadutas to be so agitated. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport says that the order carriers of Yamraj are much aggrieved because of the defeat by the four Vishnu Dutas, wanted to bring them before Yamraj and if possible punish them. So they wanted the Vishnu Dutas to be brought in front of Yamraj and punish them. Otherwise, they decided to commit suicide. Before pursuing either course, however, they wanted to know about the Vishnu Dutas from Yamraj, who is omniscient. Okay, let's go to verse 11. श्रीबाद्राय नीरुवाच इति देव स आप्रस्था प्रजा संयमनो यमः प्रीतः स्वदूतान् प्रत्याह स्मरन् पदाम्बुजं हरेः. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, thus, having been questioned, Lord Yamraj, the supreme controller of the living entities, was very pleased with his order carriers because of hearing from them the holy name of Narayan. He remembered the lotus feet of the Lord and began to reply. So, in the next 12 verses until verse 21, we will hear the instructions or explanation by Yamraj. So, when the Yamadutas had debated with the Vishnu Dutas, then they had actually received a full seminar on the holy name, a kind of a mini festival of the holy name from the Vishnu Dutas. So just like Ajamel, they had heard Krishna Katha in the association of the pure devotees, Vishnu Dutas. Ajamel had a change of heart. For the Yamadutas, there was no change of heart. Actually, the opposite. They became even more envious towards the Vishnu Dutas. They wanted them to be punished. And they wanted to pull Ajamel back to hell. However, Yamraj, simply by hearing in very brief what they heard, because the Yamdutas, they don't give an elaborate explanation. Simply they speak 2 lines to give the pastime that Ajamel chanted Narayan, the Vishnu Dutas appeared, they defeated them, thwarted their intentions, took away Ajamel. That's all they heard. Right? Not the whole debate between the Vishnu Dutas and the Yamdutas. But he's ecstatic with happiness. So that's the difference between the mood of devotees and non-devotees. That the devotees, even when they see a tinge of Krishna Katha, they blossom. And the non-devotees, the more they hear about Krishna, the more envious and angry they become. Verse 12. Yamuvacha paro madanyo jagatas otam protam patavadyatra vishvam yadam shatosya sti janmanasha na sheotavad yasya vashe chaloka. Yamraj said, my dear servants, you have accepted me as the supreme, but factually I am not. Above me and above all the other demigods, including Indra and Chandra, is the one supreme master and controller. The partial manifestation of his personality are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are in charge of the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the universe. He is like the 2 threads that form the length and breadth of a woven cloth. The entire world is controlled by him, just as a bull is controlled by a rope in its nose. So we see that Yamraj is now addressing the concerns of Yamadutas. But we also see how leaders, they deal with problematic situations. So he does not immediately delve into the specifics. He does not chastise the Yamadutas. He does not say, let's go and fight the Vishnudutas. He does not start denigrating the Yamadutas that you are without intelligence. But he begins by painting the bigger picture. So, what the leaders do is that they let the people under them draw their conclusions themselves. They present all the facts. That way, the people, they own the decision. So rather than the decision being imposed on them, because Yamraj could have spoken one verse and ended this conversation, that do not ever interfere with the devotees in the future. Go away from here. And the Yamdutas would have followed it. But they would not have been happy about doing so. They would not have owned the decision. So what Yamraj is doing is that he's explaining the things as they are, the bigger perspective, so that the Yamdutas understand what needs to be done and why they were thwarted in their attempts. So in the 7th verse, the Yamdutas had said to Yamraj that we thought that you are the supreme. The Yamraj begins with that. He clarifies, he says, I am not the supreme. There is one who is above me. So the Yamadutas can say, well, is there somebody above that person who's above you? And Yamraj says, no. Not only is he above me, he is above everyone, like Indra and Chandra. So the Yamadutas may say, yes, but there are even bigger personalities, like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So Yamraj says, true, but even they are his partial manifestations. So the Yamdutas might say, but it is Brahma who creates, it's Vishnu who maintains, and it's Shiva who annihilates. And Yamraj says, actually, it is the Supreme Lord who pervades the creation by the two types of threads. So if you look at the homespun cloth, then there are the vertical and the horizontal threads. Essentially, there are these crosses that essentially make the cloth. The whole cloth is essentially the vertical and horizontal thread. So using that analogy, Yamraj says is that the Lord, he is supporting the entire universe. He is the creator, because it's the thread that creates the cloth. And it's on the thread that the cloth is supported. So it's the Supreme Lord. It's not Brahma or it's not Vishnu, but it is the Supreme Lord who is creating and supporting the thread. And then he uses a second analogy that not only does he support the universe, but he controls it at all times, like a bull is controlled by the rope in its nose. So Yamraj has not only spoken about his inferior position, but he has spoken about the ultimate position of the Lord. So not only is the Lord above him, he is above the demigods, he is above Lord Brahma, even above Lord Vishnu, Shiva. What does he do? He creates and he maintains and he supports everything. Now, in contrast to this, Yamraj's span of control is very limited. So of the unlimited jivas in existence, 3/4 of them are in the spiritual world. Yamraj has nothing to do with them. Of the 1/4 that are living, most of them are either in the upper or the lower planets. Yamraj has nothing to do with them. Even those who live in the Bhumandal, only those who live in Bharatvarsha, who are subject to the law of karma, are under the dominion of Yamraj. Even those who live on Bharatvarsha, they occupy 8.4 million species. out of which 8 million species are non-humans, and Yamraj has nothing to do with them. So only a microcosmic part of a microcosmic part of a microcosmic part is under the span of control of Yamraj. Whereas everything is under the control of the Lord. Verse 13. Yo nam abhirvachi janam nijayam badnati tantrayam ivadamabhirga yasmai balim ta imenam karma nibandhabaddas chakita vahanti. Just as the driver of a bullock cart ties ropes to the nostrils of his bulls to control them, the Supreme Personality of Godhead binds all men through the ropes of his words in the Vedas, which set forth the names and activities of the distinct orders of human society: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. In fear, the members of these orders all worship the Supreme Lord by offering him presentations according to their respective activities. So, because Yamaraj is explaining to the Yamadutas, he is trying to explain using several analogies. So, in the previous verse, he had talked about how the Lord is the vertical and horizontal thread that is supporting all existence. Then he is the rope in the nose of the bulls that is controlling everyone through the Vedas. And he carries forth that analogy in this verse also. He uses the same analogy of the rope through the nose of a bull to demonstrate that the Lord controls everyone. So Yamraj begins by speaking in terms that the Yamadutas are familiar with. The Yamadutas are experts in the scriptures. So they know what is prescribed and what is forbidden. And this prescribed duties is based on one's varna. So those who deviate from the duty of their respective varna are candidates of punishment by the Yamadutas. So Yamraj first connects this to the Supreme Lord. He says that the Lord is the source of the Vedas. He is the creator of the law of karma, based on which you go around determining who needs to be punished and how much can they be punished. I am not that person. The Lord is the person who is the creator of the Lord of karma. So everything that the Yamadutas are doing is under the jurisdiction by the desire of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada notes that the real purpose of the Vedas is to worship the Lord. So he quotes 1 to 13. Atha Pumbe Dvija Sreshta Varnashram Vibhagasha Swa Anustistasya Dharmasya Samsadi Haritoshana. This is a famous verse that talks about Devi Varnashram. That one basically executes their duties, the Varnashram, so as to Samsiddhir Hari Toshana. Basically just to please the Lord. So Prabhupada also says that the words Namabhir Vachi are very important. In the Varnashram institution, there are different names: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasi. The Vak or Vedic injunctions give directions to all these divisions. Everyone is expected to offer obeisances to the Supreme Lord and perform duties as indicated in the Vedas. So even if they don't offer obeisances explicitly, simply by following the instructions of the Lord in the Vedas, they're offering obeisances. So this is an important point that Yamraj is conveying to the Yamdutas. Okay, verse 14, 15. अहम महेन्द्र नीति प्रचेता सोमग्निरिष पावना विरनिचि आदित्य विश्वे वस्वत साध्या मरुद्गण रुद्रगणः ससिद्धः अन्य च ये विश्वसृजो मरेषा भृग्वाद्यस्पृष्टरजस्तमस्कः यस्येतं न विदुः स्पष्टमाया सत्त्वप्रधानपि किं ततोऽन्ये I, Yamraj, Indra, the king of heaven, Nirti, Varun, Chandra, the moon god, Agni, Lord Shiva, Pavan, Lord Brahma, Surya, the sun god, Vishwasu, the eight Vasus, the Sadhyas, the Maruts, the Rudras, the Siddhas, and Marichi, and the other great rishis engaged in maintaining the departmental affairs of the universe, as well as the best of the demigods headed by Brahaspati, and the great sages headed by Vrigu, are all certainly freed from the influence of the two base material modes of nature, namely passion and ignorance. Nevertheless, although we are in the mode of goodness, we cannot understand the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What then it is to be said of others who, under illusion, merely speculate to know God? So, in the previous verse, Yamraj had begun to explain the nature of the Lord. Now, the Yamadutas might start asking him more questions. They tell us specifically this and that. So, Yamraj, out of humility, is forcing them, saying that I can tell you what I know, but I can also tell you that I do not know the Lord completely. So the Yamdutas might say, maybe there is somebody else that we can go and ask. And Yamraj says, not just me. And then he gives a list of great personality. And he talks about the great controllers, Brahma and Shiva. He talks about the demigods like Varun and Chandra. Then he talks about those who excel in Gyan and Astan, like, like Brahaspati and Bhrigu. So these are people who are predominantly in the mode of goodness, yet they cannot understand the Lord. So Chakrabarti Bhat says that this could also convey that despite transcending the mode of passion and ignorance, these personalities are still contaminated by the mode of goodness. Okay, the same point made in the 14th chapter by Krishna himself. It's also interesting to note that in this verse, the first word of the verse is aham. Yamraj says I. So, in giving the list of people who do not understand the Lord, Yamraj is placing himself as the first. That I am the most ignorant. And later on, when he will talk about the 12 Prajapatis, he will put his name last. He'll say there are 12 people who understand. And he puts his name last, that I am the least of them. So that's the nature of a Mahajan. That's the nature of a great devotee, that out of humility they consider themselves lower than everybody else. Okay, so we go on to verse 16. Yam vaina gobirmana subirva hridagirava subrito vichakshate atmanamantarhridi sanatam atmanam chakshu yatheva krityastataha param. As the different limbs of the body cannot see the eyes, the living entities cannot see the Supreme Lord, who is situated as a super soul in everyone's heart. Not by the senses, by the mind, by the life air, by thoughts within the heart, or by the vibrations of words can the living entities ascertain the real situation of the Supreme Lord. So the Yamdutas might ask that why can't you see the Supreme Lord? as he is. And Yamraj uses another analogy that the eyes see the limbs, but the limbs cannot see the eyes. So, as Paramatma, the Lord sees everything, but the living entity cannot, on his own, ascertain the real identity of the Lord. Only when the Lord reveals, then the living entity perceives. So, the analogy also conveys the role of Paramatma in all activities. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, the living entity cannot do anything without the sanction of the supersoul. The supersoul is acting at every moment, but the living entity cannot understand the form and activities of the supersoul by manipulating his senses. Although one cannot see the supersoul in one's heart, through sensual activities, his direction is necessary. Verse 70. तस्यात्मतन्त्रस्य हरेरधीसितुः परस्य मयाधिपतेर्महात्मनः प्रायेण दूता इह वै मनोहरा चरन्ति तद्रूपा गुणस्वभावः. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is self-sufficient and fully independent. He is the master of everyone and everything, including the illusory energy. He has his form, qualities, and features. And similarly, his auto carriers, the Vaishnavas, who are very beautiful, possess bodily features, transcendental qualities, and a transcendental nature, almost like his. They always wander within this world with full independence. So, in the previous set of verses, Yamaraj has glorified and established the position of the Supreme Lord. So, the Yamadutas might say, fine, we accept that the Supreme Lord is all that you are saying. But our problem is with the Vishnu Dutas. They are the ones who foiled our mission. They are the ones who disrespected you. So, Yamaraj, having established the position of the master, is now going to establish the position of his devotees. So, in 2 verses, he will talk about the devotees of the Lord. So, Yamraj is glorifying the Vishnu Dutas in the context of the relationship with Lord Vishnu. He addresses them as Prayena Duta, that they are very attractive. So, when the Yamadutas were speaking about the Vishnu Dutas, they also kept saying very attractive, and Yamraj also echoes the same sentiment. So Chakravarti Pad, he comments that Yamraj is also saying that you are all ugly. But unlike you, the Vishnu Dutas are very attractive. And because they are pure devotees, they're endowed with similar opulences as the Lord. So previously, Yamraj had established that the Supreme Lord is much superior to him. So, by induction, he is implying that the associates of the Lord are also much superior to his associates, which means that the Vishnu Dutas are much superior to the Yam Dutas. Prabhupada says that the Vishnu Dutas, Yamraj is informed that the Vishnu Dutas are no less powerful than Lord Vishnu. Since Vishnu is above Yamraj, the Vishnu Dutas are above the Yam Dutas. Person protected by the Vishnu Dutas, therefore cannot be touched by the Yam Dutas. Verse 18. Bhutani Vishnu Sura Pujitani Durdarshalingani Mahadbhutani Rakshanti Tad Bhakti Mataha Prabheyo Matascha Martyan Atha Sarvatascha. The order carriers of Lord Vishnu, who are worshipped even by the demigods, possess wonderful bodily features exactly like those of Vishnu and are very rarely seen. The Vishnu Dutas protect the devotees of the Lord from the hands of enemies, from envious persons, and even from my jurisdiction, as well as from natural disturbances. So now Yamraj is making a direct statement about the position of Vishnu Dutas. He is saying that the Vishnu Dutas are worshipped by even the demigods, whereas the Yamadutas are not worshipped by anyone. So the Yamadutas may say, okay, the Vishnu Dutas may be superior to us, but you are our master. You are above everyone. So you must be superior to them. So Yamraj says that the Vishnu Dutas protect people even from my jurisdiction, which means that they are even beyond my jurisdiction. Prabhupada talks about more practical aspect in his purport. He says sometimes members of Krishna Consciousness Society are afraid of the impending danger of world war and ask what would happen to them if a war would occur. In all kind of dangers, they should be confident of the protection by the Vishnu Dutas of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Kaunteya pratijanai na me bhakti pranashyati. Material danger is not meant for devotees. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Padam padam yad vipalam na tesham. In this material world, there are dangers at every step, but they are not meant for devotees who are fully surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord. Verse 19, the famous verse. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam navai vidur rishayo na pidevah na siddha mukhya asuro manushyaha kuto nu vidyadhara charanadayaha. Real religious principles are enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although fully situated in the mode of goodness, even the great rishis who occupy the topmost planets cannot ascertain the real religious principles, nor can the demigods or the leaders of Siddhaloka. To say nothing of the asuras, ordinary human beings, vidyadharas, and sharanas. So, based on the previous verse, the Yamdutas may ask that if the Vishnu Dutas protect devotees, why are they favoring adharma? So Ajamel was clearly adharmic. And the point was already made that dharma is derived from the Vedas. And the Vedas come from Krishna. So if the Vishnu Dutas were actually devotees of Lord Vishnu, they should protect his word. So they should have helped us in punishing Ajamel. So Yamraj responds to these implicit questions saying that you do not understand the truth of about dharma. And he says, what to speak about you? Even great personalities do not understand the truth about dharma. So he gives a list of people. So they include the Deva. So Devas are situated in the mode of goodness that is attained by Karma Kand. Then he says great rishis who are situated in Gyan. And then he says leaders of Siddhalok who have acquired siddhis through Astang. So, not by karma, not by gyan, not by astang can one understand the intricacies of dharma. So then who knows dharma? That question will be answered by Yamraj in the next two verses. Prabhupada writes in the purport that real religious principles are nistraigunya, above the three modes of material nature or transcendental. The Yamadutas did not know these transcendental religious principles, and therefore, when prevented from at arresting Ajamil, they were surprised. Krishna in 242 says, Vedavad Ratha Partha Nanyad Asti Vadina. That the supposed followers of the Vedas say there is nothing more beyond the Vedic ceremonies. So Yamraj essentially is now talking about the higher principles of the Vedas, not just that which is presented in Karm, Gyan, or Astang. Verses 20-21. स्वयंभूर्नारद शंभु कुमार कपिलो मनुः प्रहलाद जनको भीष्मो बलिर्वय सखीर्वयम् देवदासयते विज्ञानिमो धर्म भागवतं बतः गुह्यं विशुद्धं दुर्बोधं यं ज्ञानतवार्तमम् अश्नुते. Lord Brahma, Bhagavan Narad, Lord Shiva, the four Kumaras, Lord Kapil, the son of Devahuti, Swayambhavu Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janak Maharaj, grandfather Bhishma, Bali Maharaj, Sukadev Goswami, and I myself know the real religious principle. My dear servants, this transcendental religious principle, which is known as Bhagavad Dharma, or surrender unto the Supreme Lord and love for Him, is uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. It is very confidential and difficult for ordinary human beings to understand. But if by chance one fortunately understands it, he is immediately liberated, and thus he returns home back to Godhead. So, in the previous verse, Yamraj had said nobody understands Dharma. So, Vishnu, the Yamdutas might say, then what's the point in having it if nobody understands it? What is even the proof that it existed? So, Yamraj says that, well, there are some people who do understand. And he says that these are the 12 Mahajans that know Dharma, and they can clearly see what is not explicitly presented in the Smritis, Shastras. So we see that here, when giving the 12 names, Yamraj places himself at the end. So of those who know, he says, I am the least. And of those who do not know, he says, I am the foremost. So Vishnu Chakravarti says that's a symptom of humility in devotees. So why is it that only a few people know this that is presented openly in the Vedas? So it is Guhyam not because it is hidden, but it is Guhyam because it is difficult to understand unless it is explained by a right source and is accepted in the right mentality. So the same Guhyam secret that that Yamraj is talking about, Krishna himself reveals it in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And then again in 1864, he says that I am revealing this most confidential knowledge to you. But the reason, so we discussed that in the Bhakti Shastri and the Bhagavad Gita, that when Krishna says in the 9th chapter, I'm revealing the most confidential knowledge, why is he revealing it openly? Because it is the kind of knowledge that can only be understood when explained by a devotee of the Lord. So a little bit of, I guess a little bit of commentary on the 12 Mahajans. So if you look at the distribution of the personalities amongst these 12, so we first have the 3 universal controllers. We have Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. So we have Lord Brahma, Vishnu is Lord Kapila, and Lord Shiva. Then we have the 3 sons of Brahma. So we have Swambhavu Manu, who is an expert in Karmkand, he's a Grahastha. We have the four Kumaras, who are expert in Gyan. And then we have Bhagwan Narad, who's an expert in Bhakti. Then we have the two Asuras, Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj. Then we have two Raj Rishis. One of them is a Suryavanshi, Janak Maharaj, and the other is a Somvanshi, which is grandfather Bhishma. And then we have the two speakers, Sukadev Goswami and Yamraj. Another way to look at these 12 is that amongst the Devas, there is one personality, Yamraj. Amongst the Asuras, there are two personalities, Prahlad and Bali Maharaj. Amongst the Rishis, there is also two personalities, the four Kumars and Narad Muni. Amongst the universal controllers, there is three personalities, Brahma, Kapila, and Lord Shiva. And amongst the humans, there are four personalities, Swambhavu Manu, Bhishma, Janak, and Sukadev Goswami. Okay, so let me pause over here and see if there is any questions, comments, discussions. Okay, if not, then we'll continue.
Yep. One question, Prabhu. For us to understand dharma, I know we in further process we may cover that, but is it really that explicit and challenging to understand dharma for a devotee? What should be the path? Because there will be certain conflicts in understanding dharma in their own perspectives.
So the application of the principles of dharma is always confusing, right? So now it does not mean that everything about dharma is confusing, but everything about dharma cannot be understood. We see that even Yamraj himself gets confused about the principles of dharma, which is why he's cursed by the rishi. What was the name of the rishi who curses him to become Vidur? Um, I forget the name of the rishi, but he used to pierce insects with thorns as a child, and then Yamraj basically ordained punishment for him to be also pierced by a lance. And then the rishi said, I was not five, I was a young boy, less than 5 years old. I'm not accountable for my activities. So you made a mistake, so I curse you to become a Shudra. So that's how he becomes Vidur. So, so the principles of dharma are confusing for in some situations. Now, your question was for devotees. Prabhupada would say that for devotees, the principles of dharma become simplified because they're able to rationalize them based on uh, samsiddhi haritoshana, that what will please the Lord. And then he takes it to the next point, that Bhagavad Prasada, that the what pleases the Guru pleases the Lord. So if it is difficult to understand what pleases the Lord, then go by the principle of what pleases the Guru. So for devotees, dharma is rather simple, that follow the instructions of the Guru, perform activities that pleases him, refrain from activities that displeases him, and then you're perfectly executing all the angas of dharma. That's why the shelter of the Guru is also considered important.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the verse 22. एतवानेव लोकेऽस्मिन् पुंसां धर्मपरस्मृता भक्तियोग भगवती तन्नाम ग्रहणादिभिः. Devotional service, beginning with chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is the ultimate religious principle for the living entity in human society. So now in 9 verses from 22 to 30, Yamaraj glorifies the chanting of the holy name. So the Yamadutas, after hearing the previous verse, says that, my Lord Yamaraj, if you are indeed a Mahajan, then please teach us that secret that has confused us but not you. Why was the sinful Ajamel not allowed to be taken by us and punished? So Yamaraj addresses that implicit question in this verse. So he says that in spite of many varieties of dharma existing, bhakti is the real dharma, says eighth one. It is highest, para. This particular aspect of bhakti, tannam grahanadibi, which is chanting of the Lord's name. So Yamaraj specifically notes that. So this excludes bhakti which is mixed with other gunas, such as offering all your activities to the Lord. This is essentially the Abhideya Tattva of the Bhagavatam. So in 112, it is said Dhamma Projita Kaitavo, that the highest religion rejects the cheating dharma. And in 126, he says Savai Pumsha Paro Dharmo, the highest dharma is to worship Krishna. And so Yamaraj is collapsing these considerations, saying that real dharma rejects everything except for devotion to the Lord. And the devotion to the Lord is strongly manifested in the chanting of the holy name. So Prabhupada says if one fortunately understands the Supreme Lord in this way, the result is takta deha punarjanmam naiti, and the person does not take birth again. Verse 23. नामोच्चारन् महात्मयं हरेः पश्यत पुत्रकः अजामिलप्येनेव मृत्युपाशादमुच्यता. My dear servants, who are as good as my sons, just see how glorious is the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. The greatly sinful Ajamel chanted only to call his son, not knowing that he is chanting the Lord's holy name. Nevertheless, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, he remembered Narayan, and thus he was immediately saved from the ropes of death. So we see that now Yamaraj is beginning to address the specific situation that the Yamadutas had encountered. So he has built a strong context and background. He spoke about the Supreme Lord and his position of absolute supremacy over everyone. He also spoke about the position of the devotees of the Lord. He also spoke about the fact that the principles of dharma are difficult to understand. Now he is talking about the specific situation of Ajamel. So in the previous verse, Yamaraj had said that the ultimate religious principle is bhakti. So Yamduta says, may I ask, what is the proof of it? So, with great affection, Yamraj states that you do not need any other proof from me. You yourself have encountered it, you have witnessed it yourself. Without taking offense that his order was baffled, Yamraj is so pleased that somehow he has participated in glorifying the potency of the Lord. It's just like Lord Shiva was very happy when Mohini Murthy apparently put him in an uncomfortable position. But he was happy that somehow he was part of glorifying the Lord's internal and external energy. So Yamraj is now specifically talking about what happened because of which the Yamadutas were baffled. Prabhupada said there is no need to conduct research. The history of Ajamel is sufficient proof. Therefore, Mahaprabhu has said, Hare Nam eva kevalam, kalau nastev gatir anyatha. Verse 24. Etavatalam aga nirhanaya pumsham sankirtanam bhagavato gunakarma namanam vikrushiputram agavanyadajamilopi narayanayeti mriyamanaya yaya muktim. Therefore, it should be understood that one is easily relieved from all sinful reactions by chanting the holy name of the Lord and chanting of his qualities and activities. This is the only process recommended for relief from sinful reactions. Even if one chants the holy name of the Lord with improper pronunciation, he will achieve relief from material bondage if he chants without offenses. Ajamel, for example, was extremely sinful, but while dying, he merely chanted the holy name, and although calling his son, he achieved complete liberation because he remembered the name of the Lord. So when Yamraj begins to glorify Ajamel, the Yamdutas may object, saying that in verse 22, you had said Tan Nam Grahanabadi, that by chanting, hearing, and other process of bhakti, all the sins are destroyed. So, Ajmail, he was chanting inattentively, and he chanted only once with Namabas. How did that destroy sins? So, Yamraj, he once again uses the example of Ajmail to explain further. He says that Ajmail was crying. It was not proper chanting. He was calling out to his son Narayan, not to the Lord. Right? So he's talking about the condition of Ajmail. He was not calling out to the Lord, he was calling his son. Ajmail was sinful, he was not pure. He was an infamous sinner, not a Shudra sinner. So the difference is that a Shudra sinner performs sin of his because of him born in a certain varna. The Shudras are because they're born with a certain propensity, they are inclined to perform sins. But Ajamel was born as a Brahman. It was not in his nature to be sinful. And yet he was a sinner. So he was an infamous sinner. Fourth, he says this that he chanted while he was bewildered by death, not with a controlled mind. And then he said, but he attained liberation, not just the destruction of sins. So Yamraj says that is the real meaning of Tannam Granabdi. That even if one calls the Lord indirectly, even if one is sinful, even if one is an infamous sinner, Even if one chants with a bewildered mind, that chanting is sufficient to give not just freedom from sins, which means not seeing the face of the Yamadutas, but actually liberation. So, chanting intently the names and qualities of the Lord destroys all sins. And then Yamraj says Alam. Vishnu Chakravarti says the word Alam indicates that all these are not necessary. In the purport, based on this, Srila Prabhupada writes a very elaborate purport, which I strongly recommend you read because, or I'll talk about some parts of it that are probably relevant as practicing devotees. Prabhupada gives two instructions in the purport. He says that one must take a vow to chant. Prabhupada says, it is to be concluded that with a strong vow, one should chant the holy name of the Lord. And the second instruction he gives is aspire to chant inoffensively. So he says that chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is recommended even for persons who commit offenses. Because if they continue chanting, they will gradually chant offenselessly. So many times people are disheartened. They're saying that when they talk of here the 10 offenses, they say that I'm committing most of the 10 offenses. So from being a non-apradhi, I'm becoming an apradhi of the holy name. So Prabhupada gives different quotes from the scriptures to to basically talk about encourage those who are chanting offenselessly. So some of the quotes are um, the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is recommended even for persons who commit offenses. Because if they continue chanting, they will gradually chant offenselessly. By chanting the Hare Krishna mantra without offenses, one increases his love for Krishna. As stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prema Pumartha Mahan. One's main concern should be to increase one's attachment to the personality of Godhead and to increase the love. So then he quotes 11:19:24 from Srimad Bhagavatam. My dear Uddhav, the supreme religious system for which, from human society, is by which one can awaken the dormant love for me. And then Vishnu Chakravarti quotes from the Padma Puran that Nam Aprad Yukta Namanya Eva Harantyagam Avishranti Prayuktani Tanyevart Karanicha. Even if one in the beginning chants the Hare Krishna mantra with offenses, one will become free from such offenses by chanting again and again. Papakshascha bhavati smaratam tam aharnisham. One becomes free from all sinful reactions if one chants day and night, followed the recommendation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, so these, at least I found these verses to be very encouraging to practicing devotees like us. Okay, verse 25. Prayena, prayena ve, excuse me. प्रायेण वेदतम् इदं न महाजनोऽयं देव्यविमोहितमतिर्बत माययालम् त्रयां जातिकृता मतिर्मधुपुष्पितायां वैतानके महति कर्मणि युजयं मनः. Because they are bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yagyavakya and Jaimini and other compilers of the religious scriptures cannot know the secret, confidential religious system of the 12 Mahajans. They cannot understand the transcendental value of performing devotional service or chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. because their minds are attracted to the ritualistic ceremonies mentioned in the Vedas, especially the Yajur Veda, Sam Veda, and Rig Veda. Their intelligence has become dull. Thus, they are busy collecting the ingredients for ritualistic ceremonies that yield only temporary benefit, such as elevation to Svargloka for material happiness. They are not attracted to the Sankirtan movement. Instead, they are attracted to Dharma, Artha, Kam, and Moksha. So the Yamadutas may ask that if the process is so potent, why does not everybody simply follow the process of bhakti? And Yamraj here, very frankly, he says that great thinkers like Jaimini do not know. So, what about those who are actually writing the scriptures? And Yamraj says, even the powerful and learned are bewildered by the powerful Maya. What to speak of the fools? So, their intelligence is without discrimination because of the absorption in the three Vedas, which produces materialistic results. So, the essence of this is that there are people, or the majority of the people, they are more attracted to material gains. And such people, they're attracted to the grandeur of the rituals. They like the fact that there are elaborate mantras being chanted, different meters, four priests sitting, elaborate sacrifices being done, the paraphernalia, and the gold being offered. So, because they are so attracted to all this, they are unable to understand the essence of the Vedas. And Prabhupada in the purport, he gives a very interesting practical example that when the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan was inaugurated, then Prabhupada says that he was forced to engage the Smarta Brahmins to perform this very costly Karmakanda yagyas. So Prabhupada himself said he had no faith in it, but he knew that if all this elaborate deity worship, deity establishment, Pranpratishtha was not done, the temple would not be fully accepted in Vrindavan. So at great expense, he engaged many of the Smarta Brahmins locally, and they performed all those yagyas. And in the courtyard, so if you've been to the Krishna Balaram temple, there is the deities, and there's a courtyard in front. There, Prabhupada was sitting with his disciples, and they were doing Harinam. And Prabhupada mentioned that actually the real deity installation is happening over here. But he was forced to do that because most of the people are attracted to this elaborate ritualistic ceremonies. This is the same example why most of the people, great thinkers like Yagyavakya and Jaimini, they are attracted to things that are material, elaborate, ritualistic, and then they have no attraction for the simple chanting of the Lord's name. Verse 26. Evam vimrashaya sudayo bhagvate anante sarvatmana vidate khalau bhavayogam tamena dandam arante atha yadyamesham syad patakam tadapi antyurugaya vadaha. Considering all these points, therefore, intelligent men decide to solve our problems by adopting the devotional service of chanting the holy name of the Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart and who is the mind of all auspicious qualities. Such persons are not within my jurisdiction for punishment. Generally, they never commit sinful activities, but even by mistake or sometimes because of bewilderment or illusion, they sometimes commit sinful acts. They are protected from sinful reactions because they always chant the Hare Krishna mantra. So if you notice, the statements made by Yamraj are almost identical to the statements made by Vishnudutas. And somebody wants to do their exercise, I would like to see the result. is to take the instructions of Vishnu Dutas, the verses, the instructions of Yamraj, and kind of match them. But at a general level, we can see that the points that are being made are very, very similar. So here, Yamraj is talking about the fact that those who think they know the scriptures, they do not know the truth about Lord. But those who do not know the scriptures, on obtaining the mercy of the Lord or his devotees, they become purified in intelligence. And then they know the essence of the scriptures, which is to worship the Lord. So such persons, they will worship the Lord with all their minds, completely free of the desires for nityakam or kamyakam, for daily or occasional rituals. So even though they may neglect their prescribed duties, they are not to be punished. In fact, not only are they forgiven for the sins of omission, they are also forgiven for the sins of commission. So, two sins, like one is knowing what your duty is, not doing it, it's a sin of omission, and the second is going against the instruction of the Vedas. So, Yamraj says that the devotees of the Lord, they are not to be punished in either of the two cases, whether they commit a sin of omission or commission. So, some important points that are made is that 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 the realization of the potency of the holy name is a direct result of the mercy of the Lord and his devotees. It is not dependent on the knowledge of the scriptures. And such persons, they are fully satisfied by the chanting of the holy name, because the reciprocation by the holy name is far greater than the pleasure that is experienced by the execution of karma kanda activities. Because of this, such people, they abandon the karma kanda activities and simply focus on the chanting of the holy name. The proof that bhakti is a lot sweeter than karma kanda is in the actions of the devotees. If they were not experiencing a higher taste, they would have abandoned the chanting of the holy name and taken to the performance of pious activities. But they do not. But on the other hand, there are many cases where those who perform karma kand on receiving the mercy of the Lord and his devotees quickly abandon karma kand and take to the chanting of the holy name. Then the potency of the holy name is demonstrated by the fact that it obviates the need to perform prescribed duties. That means it is sitting much higher than the Vedas. And it is even more evident by the fact that even those who disrespect the Vedas, so performing sins is like disrespecting the Vedas, but have taken shelter of the holy name, are still protected. So, by these points, one can understand that the devotees are beyond the jurisdiction of Yamraj and the Yamadutas, because they are never punished for the sins of omission or commission, which is what is the jurisdiction of Yamraj. Okay, let's move on to this. How we're doing with time? Okay, we have a few more verses. Maybe we won't be able to complete them, but let's see. Verse 27. तदेव सिद्धा परि परिगीत पवित्र गाथा ये साधव समदर्शो भगवत प्रपन्नः तानोपशीदत् हरे गदया विगूपतान् नैषं वयं न च वया प्रभवा बदण्डे. My dear servants, please do not approach as devotees. They are for they have fully surrendered to the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are equal to everyone, and the narrations are sung by the demigods and the inhabitants of Siddhalok. Please do not even go near them. They are always protected by the club of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, Lord Brahma and I, and even the time factor, are not competent to chastise them. So, in verses 22, 23, 24, Yamraj talks about the glories of the holy name. In verse 25, he talks about the people who do not take to the process of bhakti. In 26, he talked about the devotees who take to the process and are beyond the jurisdiction of Yamraj. Now, Yamraj gives specific instructions to the Yamadutas. So, after explaining all this, he has to give them specific instruction. What is the specific instruction? Do not approach the devotees of the Lord. So, he says they are Bhagavat Prapanna. They are fully surrendered to the Lord. Right? So, he is first describing the characteristic of the devotees. Then they are Samadrashto. They are seeing everyone as the same, which means that the distinctions imposed by karma and gyan do not color their vision because they are seeing everyone in relationship to the Lord. This also implies that since sins are performed by those who make material distinctions, they are incapable of acting sinfully. Like samadrishti means, so why does one does sin? Because one is either sees one as having something that they want or as higher or lower. So all that distinction that comes from divided vision. Samadrishti is if you see everyone as the same, then you will not envy them, you will not aspire to get what they have. So then they will not perform any sins. Then Harer Gadaya Biguptan, that they are protected by Kaumadiki, the club of the Lord. So here, Yamraj is now giving them more specific instructions. If you go near them, you will be beaten by the Lord. He says you should consider yourself lucky. Chakravarti Pad says that Yamraj is saying to Yamdutas, because this was your first offense, the Vishnu Dutas were kind and they forgave you. Otherwise, they would have beaten you. So consider yourself lucky and in future know that the devotees are protected by Kaumadaki, the club of the Lord. So Tan Nopa Siddhartha, do not go near them in the future, or else you will be severely punished by the Lord. Naisham Vayam Chava Prabhava Dande. Then Yamraj says, what to speak of you, even me, or what to speak of me, even Lord Brahma, or what to speak of Brahma, even time factor, because Brahma himself takes birth and death. So he is subservient to time factor. So he's establishing this hierarchy. There is the Yamadutas, above the Yamadutas, there is Yamraj, above the Yamraj, there is Brahma, and above Brahma, there is the time factor. Time factor essentially is the law of karma. He says none of them are competent to punish the devotees because the karma of the devotees is given by Krishna, not by the law of karma. So that's why he's saying that even beyond the time factor. And then he says, Te Deva Siddha Parigita Pavitra Gatha. He says that you should not be upset at Ajamel. You should not be upset at the Vishnu Dutas. You should be happy that you encountered a devotee, that somehow you encountered the pure devotees. Because the glories of such devotees are sung by perfected beings. So even perfected beings like the Devas and the Siddhas who are far, far superior to you, they are glorifying the devotees. And you, somehow or else, have had the good fortune to get the direct association, to hear directly from the Vishnu Dutas. So, all glories to you. So, in this way, Yamraj is instructing the Yamdutas. Okay, we'll do one more verse and then we will end for the day. Verse 28. Tananyadavam asato vimukhan mukunda pada vrinda makaranda rasadajashram nishkinchana paramhamsa kulerashnage justad grah niraya vartamani baddha trishna. Paramhamsas are exalted persons who have no taste for material enjoyment and who drink the honey of the Lord's lotus feet. My dear servants, bring to me for punishment only persons who are averse to taste of that honey, who do not associate with Paramhamsas and who are attached to family life and worldly enjoyment, which forms the path to hell. So the Yamdutas may say that if we do not get the devotees, who do we get to you for punishment? And Yamraj says, those who are not devotees. Now, important to understand here, Yamraj is not saying that get all the devotees for punishment. Because the context over here is that the Yamdutas will only go when there are sinful activities that are being performed. So, the point Yamraj is saying, when non-devotees perform sinful activities, then you get them to me for punishment. Another way of understanding it is that those who are non-devotees will inevitably commit sins because of their strong attraction for material enjoyment. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned how the mode of passion, eventually it will devolve to the mode of ignorance. That's the nature. The nature of the modes is they always flow down. So the mode of goodness devolves to the mode of passion, passion to ignorance. So those who are non-devotees, they will eventually commit sins. Then you get them to me. But don't get to me devotees, even if they're committing sins. Okay, so let's end over here. We have about 6 more verses. We'll complete them next time. And I can pause here for a few minutes and see if there is any questions or comments.
Yeah, Prabhu. This was very impressive where about Prabhupada doing chanting while Smarta Brahmins were performing the rituals. But at the same time, this is like a practical example as I'm working through my logistics of my son's marriage now. So, doing those ritualistic activities is only for to the convince a certain or to follow some like a parampara values. If you don't do, it will be an offense as well, right? And even though we have strong conviction, we tend to go towards that route what even Prabhupada took it, like going through with smart awareness. Is it the right approach to understand and continue with those ritualistic activities, or just overrule as we have conviction towards holy name to ignore all the rituals?
So same principle that Srila Prabhupada applied for the inauguration of the temple, that all the ritualistic activities were performed, but Prabhupada also accompanied that with the chanting of the holy name. And internally he had this understanding that the real process that is attracting the deities is the chanting of the holy name. So when we engage in activities, either for social purpose or cultural purposes, that are karam kand or that look like karam kand, we understand we do that for the sake of general acceptance. but we accompany it with the chanting of the holy name and understand that the holy name is the real process that goes on.
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, in text 26, when you were discussing, even if by mistake, they may commit sinful acts in that verse, I wanted to clarify, did you happen to say that even if someone may not give activities, if they chant the holy name, they are still delivered? They're excused? Did you make a statement like that, Prabhu?
I actually was not able to hear the last statement you said. Can you repeat it?
Uh, the statement, I thought I heard something like even if somebody may not respect, those ritualistic activities, if they chant the holy name, they are excused or something like that.
That is correct.
So, and one of the 10 offenses is that, right? Like about the Vedic, those ritualistic activities, we don't disrespect them.
Which
Is
offense is
there
that?
a, one second. Blaspheme Vedic literatures or scriptures in pursuance to Vedic version?
To consider the chanting of the holy name as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities
No,
offered
no,
in the Vedas?
to blaspheme the Vedic scriptures in or
To blaspheme the
version.
Vedic scriptures or scriptures in person of the Vedic version.
Yes. Am I misunderstanding? I mean, it seems like it almost sounds the same, so I wanted to get that clarified.
So, um, the performing of the sinful activities by the devotees is presented not as an ornament. So, it is not presented that the devotees are encouraged to perform sinful activities. The opposite of it, right? So if the devotees are blaspheming the Vedic scriptures, then it's an offense to the holy name, and it basically will um, cover the potency of the holy name. But the point that is made is that they are not to be punished in a way which somebody else who is not chanting blasphemes the Vedic scriptures. So blasphemy to the Vedic scripture is equated to performing of sinful activities. One says that who cares if the scriptures say that one should practice ahimsa? The scriptures are nonsense. I will eat meat. So if the devotee says that, they are still not eligible to be punished by Yamraj. But if a non-devotee says that, then they become eligible to be punished by Yamraj. So that's the distinction that's made.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So if there are no more questions, we'll end over here. वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितनाम पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय शिला प्रभुपाद की जय Thai Gaur Premanand. Hare Hare Krishna. By the way, I just remember the name of the rishi is Manduka Rishi, the one who cursed Yamraj to become Vidura. Just thought I'll share that. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.